Hi friends, welcome back. Today we're talking about what is a quadratic equation. A quadratic equation is just a type of function that we are encountering in algebra that has a variable that is squared. So typically you'll see it in standard form, which looks something a little bit like this. So we have ax squared plus bx plus c. This is a quadratic because we know that we have x squared here. These two other terms are not required for it to be a quadratic, just that you have x squared. So we call that, remember, terms are broken up by addition, subtraction. So we have three terms here. This is our quadratic term, this is our linear term, and this is our constant term. This is our linear term because if you remember back to the equation of a line, y equals mx plus b, our exponent on our x is just 1. A constant term is just, it's called the constant because there's no variable that's going to change that constant or change that value, so that's why it's constant. So these are our quadratic terms, our linear terms, and our constant terms when we have a quadratic function in standard form. So let's talk about this guy right here. This is our parent graph, y equals x squared. Now, if we plugged in -2 for x squared, remember we would be putting it in parentheses, so it would look like y equals -2 squared, which means it would be -2 times -2, which gives us +4. So if I were to graph all these points, it would look like this. Our vertex is at the origin, and then it would go over 1, up 1, over 1, up 3. Because when we plug in 2, we get 4. When we plug in -2, we get +4. Plug in -1, we get 1. So you can see our basic one is over 1, up 1, over 1, up 3. And that pattern repeats itself a lot, so you'll hear that quite frequently. This shape created by a quadratic function or a quadratic equation is called a parabola. So that's a key word to write down here. You're going to want to write this in your notes, and you're going to want to write this. You can graph this out if you want, just so that you have a copy of this parent function here. Okay, let's practice this. The other thing we can do is evaluate these quadratic equations, and an equation has an equal sign here, for given numbers. Sometimes, basically we're plugging that in to see what happens when we have x equals -7. So for example, if I had an xy chart, I would say, okay, when I plug in -7, what do I get for y? So y equals, and remember when you're plugging in, you want to use parentheses, especially if this guy is a negative. Sorry, my pen is dying. -7 squared plus 3. You don't necessarily have to put the 3 in parentheses. I accidentally did that. -7 times -7 minus 18. Remember, we do our exponents and our multiplication first. So we get y equals quantity -7 squared is -7 times -7, which is +49. Plus -21 minus 18. And I like to change my negatives or my subtractions to, and I'll do it with another thing, add the opposite. Because what I can do now is gather up my positives. So y equals 49 plus, and then gather up my negatives. So 8 and 1 is 9, and so -39. So y equals 10. So when I plug in -10 or -7, I end up with 10 for my y. So that's just a quick introduction on quadratics. If you have any questions, leave them below. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.